following video contains a discussion of real events involving harm to a minor, as well as themes of psychological disturbance, online manipulation, and the blurred line between fiction and reality. No graphic content is shown or described. Viewer discretion is advised, particularly for younger audiences. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health, please reach out to a trusted adult or mental health professional.
Where are you?
Jamie, get up, get there.
Darkness. Not the kind you get when you close your eyes. The kind that has weight. The kind that presses in from every direction and simply waits. In 2009, a man sat down at his computer and created a character for an online contest. He wasn't trying to make history. He wasn't trying to change anything.
It began as a story of a family driven from their home by foreclosure, but recent developments have shown it to be much more than that.
It was just a forum thread, just a creative exercise. He gave his creation no face, no voice, no origin, no rules, no story. You're looking at what they wanted you to. You're looking at what they wanted you to see, at the familiar, and then something pulls your eye to the edge of the frame, to the trees, and there it is. And now you can't look away. And somehow you already know. It has been watching you for much longer than you've been watching it. 5 years after that forum post, that shape would be spoken aloud inside a real police interrogation room by two 12-year-old girls in Wisconsin, trying to explain something that had happened in the real world, in daylight, in a park that children played in, a character born from a Photoshop contest, named in a police report. This is not really a story about a monster. It's a story about a system, about what happens when millions of people pour their fear into the same vessel at the same time, and what that vessel becomes when it's full. Let's go back to the actual moment of creation. June of 2009. A corner of the internet called Something Awful, a forum known for dark humor, creative communities, and a particular love of the strange. A Photoshop contest is posted. The premise is deceptively simple. Take a real photograph and add something paranormal. Don't explain it. Don't frame it. Just make it look like it was always there. Make it feel like it was found, not made. A user named Victor Surge, real name Eric Knudsen, submits 2 photographs. The first is a black and white image. Children playing outdoors. Slightly grainy, slightly washed out. The kind of photograph that already carries the specific sadness of something you can never return to. Everything is normal. And then, at the edge of the frame, between the trees, there is a figure, tall in a way that human beings simply are not tall. No face, no features, just a dark suit and a silhouette that exists in the geometry of the image like a splinter. Wrong enough to notice, impossible to ignore once you have. The second image, more children. The figure is closer now. Beneath it, Eric adds text formatted to look like a recovered document. A Child Protective Services file. Something to the effect of 14 missing. We don't go near the tree line anymore. 2 images, 2 captions, 1 forum thread. And that was all it took. The internet didn't just share those images, it adopted them. Within hours, users were writing backstory. Within days, the mythology was expanding in every direction. Someone gave the figure tentacles. Someone gave it the ability to erase memory. Someone coined the term proxies. Humans hollowed out by prolonged exposure, now doing its bidding. Someone decided it had always existed, that if you looked hard enough at old photographs, at historical records, at cave paintings, you would find evidence of it stretching backward through time. A retroactive haunting that reached before the internet, before photography, before language itself. They called it the Slender Man. And here is what made him unlike every monster that came before him. Dracula belongs to Bram Stoker. Frankenstein belongs to Mary Shelley. Even borrowed monsters have a source. Slender Man had none. No one owned him. No one held the authority to say this is what is real and this is what is not. He belonged to whoever wanted to write him. He was the first monster raised entirely by the crowd. And the crowd, it turned out, was very good at this. He migrated into a broader ecosystem of online horror that was just finding its own identity, a genre called creepypasta. Short, anonymous fiction designed to feel discovered rather than written. No author, no publication. Just a story moving from screen to screen with no traceable origin. Authorless stories feel more real. If there's no writer, there's no one to tell you it's fiction. But the real transformation came through a YouTube channel called Marble Hornets. The premise? A young man named Jay reviews old tapes left behind by a college friend, a film student who abandoned a project and then vanished from everyone's life without explanation. In the footage, filmed in parks, in hallways, inside ordinary apartments, there is a figure, tall, faceless, in a suit. Marble Hornets never once said the name Slender Man. The audience connected the dots themselves. That act of connection made it feel personal in a way being told directly never could. The format is what made it revolutionary. Videos uploaded out of sequence with no schedule. Upload dates matching real calendar dates. A second mysterious channel appeared, called To the Ark, posting cryptic replies that seemed to bleed out of the fiction and into the real world. It used the language of social media to make the story behave like life. This is what researchers call an ARG, an alternate reality game. A story engineered to make you forget it's a story. And it's spread the way fear spreads. A classmate shows you the first entry in the cafeteria. You go home. You watch it again, alone, with the lights off. And it's different in the dark. It's always different in the dark. The audience wasn't consuming this story. They were living inside it. And once you're inside a story, once you've helped build it, once it's passed through your hands, the border between what you've imagined and what is real starts to feel less fixed than you thought it was. I want to slow down here for a moment, because the next part of this story only makes sense if you understand what was quietly happening beneath the surface. The people most deeply immersed in this mythology tended to be young, and the adolescent mind carries a heightened capacity for immersive belief, for getting so far inside a world that the walls of it start to feel like the walls of the actual world. That's part of what makes being young feel so vivid, but it also means the line between the imagined and the real can become genuinely harder to hold under the right conditions. Layer the format on top of that. Video on the same platform where you talk to your friends doesn't give your brain the same distance that a book or a movie screen does. The cognitive separation, the part of you that knows this is fiction, gets quieter. An ARG turns the volume all the way down. Marble Hornets didn't just tell you a story, it behaved as though the story was already happening in the same world where you lived. And then there is the social layer. We calibrate our sense of reality through our community. When everyone around you treats a mythology as though it might be real, even playfully, even ironically, your baseline quietly shifts. The way a room gets cold so slowly, you don't notice until you realize you've been shivering for 20 minutes. For most people, the game was always just a game. They could feel the edges of it. They could step back out whenever they wanted. And they did, and they were fine. Horror has always worked this way. It lets you rehearse fear from a safe distance. It's been doing that since the first campfire. But for a small number of people, particularly those already carrying weight that no one around them had noticed, the distance had closed. The exit wasn't visible anymore. Not because the story put it there, but because the story filled a space that something else had already hollowed out. That distinction between cause and vessel is the most important thing to understand about what happened next. May of 2014, Waukesha, Wisconsin, a Saturday morning so ordinary it had no reason to remember itself. 3 girls walked into a park. 2 of them had a plan. The third one survived. She was found in the woods hours later by a passing cyclist. She received help. She lived. She grew up. I'm telling you that now, clearly before anything else, because this story is about to get dark, and she deserves to be more than a detail inside someone else's mythology. What investigators found in the interrogation rooms that followed was not what anyone expected. It was not rage. It was not impulse. What they found was something far more unsettling than either of those things. It was a belief system, one that had been quietly constructing itself for months. In the glow of a screen, in the hours after everyone else in the house had gone to sleep, the 2 girls had spent a year and a half immersed in Slender Man mythology, reading the stories, watching the videos, going deeper into the forums, deeper into the lore, deeper into a world that had no floor. And somewhere in that descent, something shifted. They came to believe that Slender Man was real, not as a character, not as a story, as an entity with a physical location, a mansion deep in a forest, and a hierarchy and rules for earning his approval. They believed that to become his proxies, to enter his world, to be protected by him rather than taken by him, they needed to prove their loyalty. They needed to do something that couldn't be undone. That was the plan. When investigators sat across from these two girls and asked them why, really why, the answers were not the answers of children who had done something wrong and knew it. They were the answers of children who believed completely and without hesitation that what they had done was necessary, logical, even protective. That is what makes this story different from every other tragedy that has ever been blamed on a piece of media. It wasn't influence. It wasn't imitation. It was immersion so total, so sustained, so undetected by every adult in their lives, that the architecture of a fictional world had quietly replaced the architecture of the real one. Psychiatric evaluations would later confirm that both girls were living with serious, undiagnosed conditions that predated Slender Man entirely, conditions that had gone unseen for years. Slender Man didn't create the fracture, but he gave it a name, a face, a purpose. He became the language for something that had already been building in the dark, long before anyone thought to look. That distinction matters more than almost anything else in this story, because getting it wrong, pointing at the myth instead of the people, means the children who need to be seen remain invisible. And that is its own kind of horror. But in May of 2014, that nuance hadn't arrived yet. The headlines had, and they were deafening. The coverage landed fast and it landed loud. Within 24 hours, Slender Man was everywhere. Cable news, morning shows, parenting blogs. The narrative that formed in those first 48 hours was surgically simple. A monster on the internet had reached through a screen and into a Wisconsin park. The internet was dangerous. Horror content was a signal to your children. Lock down the devices. Scrub the feeds. Journalists who had never spent an hour in a horror forum were suddenly experts on digital mythology. And Slender Man, a character built collaboratively by thousands of creative young people who were perfectly fine, was being treated as a virus, something that infected whatever it touched. Sound familiar? It should, because we have been exactly here before. In the 1980s, it was Dungeons and Dragons, congressional hearings, made-for-television warnings, an organization literally called Bothered About Dungeons and Dragons, touring churches and schools with the message that tabletop fantasy games were Satanism's front door. The panic ended. The game continued. No one was recruited by Satan. Before that, comic books. A psychiatrist named Frederick Verdum spent years arguing in print that comics were manufacturing juvenile delinquency. The industry nearly collapsed under the pressure. A self-censorship board was created just to survive. Verdum's research was later heavily criticized and shown to be deeply flawed. But entire genres of storytelling had already been buried for a generation. There has always been a new medium, and there has always been a moment when a tragedy gets pinned to it, when something complicated and human and almost impossible to fully understand gets flattened into a clean headline about the thing they were watching, the game they were playing, the story they were reading. The fear is never really about the content. It's about the change, about a world moving faster than understanding can follow. That fear is human, but when it outruns thinking, it tends to protect nothing and harm a great deal. I want to stop here for just a moment, because we're at the center of this story, and I want to know where you're sitting with all of it. You've followed this from a forum contest to a police report to a moral panic that echoes every moral panic in living memory. You've seen how the myth was built. You've seen how fear travels. You've seen what happens when a story stops having edges. So I want to ask you directly. Type the word myth in the comments if you believe Slender Man was always just a story, creative fiction that some people, for complicated reasons, were unable to keep at the right distance. Type the word monster if you believe something else, that a story told at sufficient scale, believed by enough people, can become something more than a story, something with consequence, something that operates in reality regardless of whether it is real. I read every comment, and I'm genuinely asking, because I don't think this has a clean answer. Both might be true at once, and the tension between them is exactly where this story lives. Let's keep going. Out of thousands of horror stories born on the early internet, why this one? Why did Slender Man leave a mark that others didn't? Start with the design. Every great monster in the horror tradition comes with rules, limits, things it cannot do, places it cannot go. Those constraints are what make a monster comprehensible. Comprehensibility is what makes it survivable. Even in fiction, Slender Man had none of that. No fixed rules, no defined edges. He was an open system, and an open system invites the brain to complete it, to fill every blank with whatever that particular mind finds most unbearable. He became different for everyone who encountered him. Uniquely personal, built in a quiet way by the fear of whoever was looking. Then there was the medium. Video on the same platform as your real life removes the distance that a page or a screen frame provides. An ARG removes it entirely. Marble Hornets didn't present a story. It behaved like something that was already happening. Your brain, somewhere below the level of conscious thought, had no clean way to file that. And then the transmission. A friend sent you the link. A classmate showed you the video. It arrived wearing the face of someone you trusted. Social endorsement is one of the quiet mechanisms through which we decide what is real. And this story traveled exclusively through trust. But the thing that made Slender Man genuinely different from every monster before him, the thing I keep returning to, is the absence of an ending. Dracula dies. Frankenstein's monster burns. Every great monster in the literary tradition has a resolution. A moment that closes the loop, that allows the fear to exhale. Slender Man was never given one. He was released into the world unfinished and has remained unfinished ever since. New stories are being written about him tonight. He cannot be concluded because no single person has the authority to conclude him. He belongs to everyone. And what belongs to everyone cannot be quietly put away. Here is what I think that means, and why it matters beyond horror. Once a story escapes its creator, it doesn't belong to them anymore. It belongs to the system, and systems don't stop because one person decides they should. So here's the real question. Not about Slender Man specifically, but about the thing that made him possible. When enough people pour belief into a story, when they build it together, spread it through channels they trust, repeat it in enough dark bedrooms on enough sleepless nights, at what point does it stop being fiction? Not physically, not literally, but in terms of consequence, in terms of what it does in the world. Because here's what we know. Your body doesn't cleanly distinguish between a real threat and a vividly imagined one. Fear is physiological. If you believe something is watching you, your heartbeat changes. Your body moves differently. Your choices change. A story that produces genuine fear is already producing real effects. In people, in behavior, in the world those people move through. Now multiply that. Millions of people, years, the same mythology passing through the same channels, each person adding a little more weight, a little more detail, a little more of their own darkness to something that was already growing. We've watched this dynamic unfold in ways that have nothing to do with horror fiction. Viral narratives producing real panic, algorithms amplifying fear because fear drives engagement, communities constructing alternate realities and then acting on them in the actual one. The mechanism is always the same. Shared story reshapes shared perception. Shared perception reshapes behavior. Behavior reshapes the world. The campfire is where this started. Humans gathered in the dark and told each other what the darkness contained. Those stories determined which paths the community avoided, which sounds made them freeze, what they taught their children to fear. The campfire reached 30 people. The forum reaches 30 million. Scale doesn't just amplify a story. At a certain point, it transforms it into something no single person created and no single person can stop. I'll be honest with you. I started this story thinking the most interesting thing about Slender Man was the character. I don't think that anymore. The character is almost beside the point. What's interesting, what's genuinely unsettling when you sit with it, is the system that caught him and carried him and amplified him until he was heavy enough to land in a real interrogation room. That system is still running. It didn't stop when Slender Man peaked. It's running right now tonight, carrying other stories, building other mythologies, giving shape to other fears that haven't fully arrived yet. And I think, if we're being honest, we don't entirely know what it's building. Let's come back to where this started. A man, a computer, a Tuesday evening in June of 2009. He made 2 images, wrote a few lines of fake text, gave something a shape and let it go. What happened after that wasn't up to him. Once a story leaves its creator, it changes hands. It moves through people who add their own fear, their own darkness, their own need for a shape to put around the things they don't understand. It stops being one person's invention and becomes something more distributed, more collective, more difficult to trace back to any single origin. And the more people it passes through, the harder it becomes to say with certainty where the story ends and something else begins. Slender Man was built from borrowed fear. Fear that is older than the internet, older than photography, older than language. The fear of something at the edge of your vision that was there before you noticed it. The fear that the darkness outside the light is not empty, that it has noticed you, that it has been patient, that it has been waiting far longer than you've been looking. Eric Knudsen gave that fear a shape. The internet gave it a voice. The algorithm gave it reach. And somewhere in that chain, somewhere between the forum post and the shared video, and the ARG, and the bedroom in the dark, something shifted in a way that nobody planned, and nobody fully understood, and nobody has fully explained since. I'm not going to tell you what that something was. I don't think I could even if I wanted to. What I'll say instead is this. The stories that move through systems like this, stories without authors, without endings, without anyone at the controls, they don't just pass through people. They leave something behind, a residue, a slight change in how you hear a sound in the dark, a moment of hesitation at the edge of a tree line. Maybe that's all it is. Maybe that's enough. The campfire is burning, the stories are moving, the system is running, and somewhere at the edge of the frame, something is standing very still. If this story got under your skin, if it made you think about the way fear moves, the way belief spreads, the way the internet builds things none of us fully control, then I want to hear from you. Type myth or monster in the comments. Tell me where you landed and why. I read every single one. And if you want to go deeper, if you want to explore more stories about the places where fiction and reality blur, where the internet creates something no one intended, where belief becomes consequence, subscribe, hit the bell, because there are more stories like this one, stories that start in the dark and end somewhere you didn't expect. I'll see you in the next one.